Hi, I am Roman Kosarev. I'm a reporter for RT. I've been working here in Donbass for the last 8 years. Probably the only journalist, English-speaking journalist, who's been working here for the last 8 years, and I showed all the hardship that the local people had to go through. And I'm really glad that now, after 8 years, we're seeing more Western journalists here, although it's a pool of people, but hopefully they will get some answers as to what's been happening here. And it's not, Russia attacking Ukraine. It's not Russia starting a war. It's Russia ending the war that's been happening here for the last 8 years. It's Russia who are putting a stop to all the suffering of the people that went through hell over the last 8 years, and hopefully this will end very soon.
And Roman, I'm aware of, when you say suffering, I'm aware of what that means, but for people who don't know what's been happening here, what do you mean by suffering?
Over the last 8 years, I've seen children ripped apart by shelling, elders ripped apart by shelling, people hiding in bomb shelters, people who have no access to food, water, electricity. That's the kind of hardship we're talking about. We're talking about an all-out war of Ukraine against their own people. Well, at this point, they're not their people anymore because the republics have been recognized by Russia. And, I was here in Donetsk when Russia announced that their recognition of Donbass republics, and people were really, really happy. They were still being shelled. Shelling continues to this day, but now they have certainty in tomorrow. They know that Russia is with them, and they know that there is a bright future ahead, and not this sense of uncertainty that they've been feeling over the last 8 years. Now they know for a fact that tomorrow will be better.
And Roman, I've heard, and I think perhaps you can confirm, I've heard a lot of reports about mass graves being found. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, I've seen those mass graves myself. I've been working here in 2014, 2015, over the last 8 years, and I've seen those mass graves. And, I'd like to tell you about one incident where a territory here in Donbass was liberated. It was Aidar, a nationalist battalion that was, they retreated, and on that territory we found mass graves. And I did a report on that. You can find it on YouTube. That was back in 2015, I believe. And I saw, it's really hard to talk about it. I saw a woman. She later I found out she was 19 or 20 years old. She had her hands tied behind her back. She was pregnant. Her belly was pretty big. She had her hands tied behind her back, and she had a bullet hole in her head. So she was executed, basically, and I saw that grave. So these people, as they were retreating, they have a policy of scorched earth.
Yeah.
Leave nothing behind, and just for them, this is a territory. This is not a country. For them, this place must be either free of any dissent, any Russians, any Russian-speaking people for that matter, because many Ukrainians speak Russian as well. So once they leave, they want to basically destroy everything. And that scene of that woman, young girl basically, pregnant girl, who was executed for what reason I don't know, but probably for no reason at all, just because they felt like it at the time.
were you in Donetsk when the Tochka-U was fired in the center of the city 10 days ago, I think it was?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was in Moscow at the
Okay.
time. I had to go back to Moscow for a couple of weeks,
Yep.
and I wasn't here. But that's absolutely terrible what happened. It's the center of the city. It's a place where people go to banks, stores. It's horrible what had happened. More than 20 people were killed as the result of that shelling. And they used it's a ballistic missile used against civilians.
And it had cluster munitions.
They had cluster munitions as well.
So my understanding is that it was shot down, but nonetheless, at least one cassette exploded. And can you just talk a little bit about the range of this and what is a cassette for people who don't know military language?
Well, first of all, the ballistic missile in question, its NATO classification is SS-21 Scarab, I believe. It's capable of carrying a nuclear load. Well, obviously that wasn't the case in this instance. But it's a missile that creates absolutely huge destruction. Well, the cassette, basically it explodes up in the air and kills everything in sight. I mean, legs are cut off, heads are cut off.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. I would not wish that upon my worst enemy, for something like that to happen to them. But it's a really terrible weapon that's, it's back from Soviet times, and unfortunately Ukraine has a lot of those weapons that they're using against people in Donbass. A missile like that landed on Russian territory a couple of days ago as well. And right now it's probably a state of agony for the Ukrainian military, because Russia is carrying out its demilitarization operation, and Russia's goal in all of this is for Ukraine to not have an army anymore, because they have been terrifying people here in Donbass for the last 8 years, and enough is enough, and Russia is here to stop this war, and for Ukraine to be neutral once again, and for Ukraine to be denazified, and for Ukraine to be a normal and a free country as it's supposed to be.
And I know you probably haven't been able to go into Ukraine outside of Donbass. Well, this is not any longer Ukraine, but I mean, it's not only, the people of Donbass have suffered tremendously over the past 8 years, but people within Ukraine proper, also Russian speakers, and people who maybe if they're not even Russian speakers, but maybe sympathize with what's happening in Donbass, have been suffering. Can you talk a little bit about that? Even though you're not based there, you have the knowledge about what's going on in Ukraine.
Well, I'm banned from entering Ukraine.
Yeah, so am I. I think we're both on the same kill list.
Exactly. I'm banned from entering Ukraine, but back in 2014, there were a lot more people who were siding with Russia. But over the last 8 years, media and any kind of dissent, even within the government, was quashed. It was absolutely, banned, if you will. Like the last couple of days, 11 political opposition parties were banned as well. A year ago, 3 opposition TV channels were banned. So those people who were, balancing between the two sides, over the last 8 years, they were brainwashed to the point where they don't believe anything anymore unless it comes from the from Ukrainian media. Hopefully in time the people will be able to return their critical thinking.
Yeah.
And because critical thinking in Ukraine and probably
in the
also
West,
the
too.
Western world is just non-existent.
Yeah.
So hopefully people will be able to read and watch many sources and not what their government feeds them.
And speaking of sources, where can we find your work?
You can find. I know. I think I'm banned on YouTube. I think I'm banned pretty much everywhere. But you can search me on the internet. Roman Kosarev, RT.
Okay.
Donbass, Donetsk, Russia.
Right. I will get some links from you, and I'll throw them in
Yeah,
when I
awesome.
upload this. All right. Thank you.
Thank you
Спасибо
very much.
большое.